So our solve and share says, your school needs to buy chairs for the cafeteria. The budget for the chairs is $1,489. About how many of these chairs can your school buy for the cafeteria? You may solve this problem in any way you choose. It will take about 3 or 4 minutes to solve this problem. When you look at this problem, you see that it says about how many of these chairs can your school buy for the cafeteria. That's your indication that you should be estimating. When we estimate, we're going to use compatible numbers frequently. What that means, compatible numbers or even friendly numbers, that typically means numbers that you can easily work with in your head. Not always, but many times you can. Compatible numbers mean that we take a look at both of our numbers and we say, what would make these compatible with each other? What would make these easy to divide? One way you could have done this was to take the 1,489 and round it down to 1,300, which would easily be divisible by 13. You also could have taken your 1,489 to 1,400 and taken the cost of the chair to 14. Both of these would have made compatible numbers that would have made this problem much easier to do. Not everyone is going to do an estimate the same unless we specifically say you need to estimate to the nearest whole number, the nearest tens. When we're asking you to do compatible or friendly numbers, those can be different for different people. Let's go ahead and take a look at our video.
How can you use compatible numbers to estimate quotients? Think about this question during the lesson. A theater sold 3,084 tickets for a show. The seating in the theater is divided into sections. About how many sections will be used to seat all the ticket holders? What operation can you use to find the number of sections needed to seat the ticket holders?
Select your answer.
You can use division. What division expression represents the problem situation? You can write 3,084 divided by 64 equals.
The question asks about how many, so you can estimate.
Step 1. You know the number of seats in each section and the total number of tickets sold. Divide to find the number of sections needed to seat all the ticket holders. Find compatible numbers for 3,084 and 64. Why would you want to use compatible numbers to estimate instead of dividing 3,084 by 64?
When we're estimating, the reason we would want to use compatible numbers is because they're easier to do in our head. And when we're not looking for an exact answer, we want to make that problem easier. If you can't do the compatible numbers in your head, that's okay too. It should still be an easier problem for you to complete. If we're using compatible numbers, we shouldn't be ending up with remainders or decimals. These are numbers that we should be able to divide and get a whole number answer.
Compatible numbers are easier to work with, and you can use mental math. Think 30 can be divided easily by 6. 3,060 are close to 3,084 and 64. 3,060 are compatible numbers. How do you decide which numbers to use when estimating?
For some of us, we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to instantly have an idea where we want to go and what's going to be an easy number for us to do mentally or to calculate relatively easily. One thing that you can also do is take a look at one of your numbers. So in this case, I would start with the 64, and I would turn that into something I would round up to the nearest 10 or up or down. So we're going to go to 60. Then I would think, looking at my 6, what is a multiple of 6 that would get me close to 30? And then I would say, oh, 5. And so then I would look and I would say, I would go through and say, like, 6, 12, 18, 24, and I would go through. And when I hit something near 30, which is, I would hit 30 even, right? So I would go 3,000.
Compatible numbers you use should be close to the original numbers and be easily divided using mental math. Step 2. Divide. 3,000 divided by 60 is equal to 50. About 50 sections will be used to seat all the ticket holders.
Let's go ahead and try this and see what it looks like. So these are the different sets of compatible numbers you could have used. So in this case, they went with 60 and 3,000, and that's relatively close to our original numbers. You could have gone with 50 and 3,000, which is still close. 60 would be closer, but 50 and 3,000 still perfectly acceptable. Down here, you see that they came down to 40. By coming down to 40, they needed to find something, and again, they probably could have looked at the 4 here and then said, what's close to 30 that's a multiple of 4? And they got 32. So then they rounded the 3,084 up to 3,200. Again, not as close as the 3,000 divided by 60, but still an acceptable estimate. And down here they did 80 and 3,200. And again, if you think about it, a multiple of 8 is 32. So we know that that division is going to come out evenly. We're not going to have remainders. We're not going to have decimals.
Check for reasonableness. You can use multiplication to check your answer. 50 times 60 is equal to 3,000, so the answer is reasonable. Now you know how to use compatible numbers to estimate quotients.
All right, let's take a peek at our textbook and let's see what our lesson looks like today. All right, let's look at the do you understand. To estimate 2,265 divided by 74 would division with the compatible numbers 2,480 give a reasonable estimate. Is there another pair of compatible numbers you can use for a good estimate? Explain both answers. Take just a second to look at that one. So 2,400 is pretty close to 2,265, and 80 is pretty close to 74. Those would be reasonable, compatible numbers to use. That would make a reasonable estimate. When we say reasonable estimate, we mean that the estimated answer is going to be somewhat close to the actual answers. Is there another pair of compatible numbers you can use for a good estimate? Yes. You're almost always going to have more than one option. You also could have done 2,100 divided by 70. That one would have worked well. And when we look at this, we see that 21 is a multiple of 70. And up here, 24 is a multiple of 8. And that's a hint to us that those are going to be good compatible numbers. So let's take a look at number 2. Caesar and his crew have 765 bottles of water to put into cases. They put 24 bottles into each case. Caesar thinks they will need about 40 cases. Is this the best estimate? Why or why not? I'll give you just a minute to think about that. So let's take a look at that. One of the things that I would probably do if I were doing this problem is I see that we have 24 here. Right away, my brain takes that to 25 because I know that 100 can be divided into 4 25s. I kind of think about quarters and a dollar. So then when I look here, I say, well, I could have taken that to 700 and, sorry, that doesn't look very good, 750 divided by 25, and I would get an answer of 30. Now, while Caesar's answer of 40 isn't too far off from my answer of 30, my estimate is still better because I'm not changing these two numbers as much as Caesar would have been. So this would be a better estimate than Caesar's estimate. So let's take a look over here. Okay, so here we're going to use compatible numbers in 3 through 8 to estimate our answers. One of the ways I would start, especially if you're not sure what would make good compatible numbers, I would start on number 3. I would start with your 43, and I would decide which way I want to take 43. I'm going to round that down because it's closer to 40 than it is to 50. Once I do that, I'm going to look at my 2,863, and I'm going to say, what number would be a multiple of 4 that would give me something close to 28? And I can see that, in fact, 28 is going to be my answer. So I would do this to, my pen's not working, 2,800 divided by 40. That's really messy and doesn't look very good. Over here, I would start with my 12. This is going to be a pretty easy one. Anytime you can take your number to something like a 10 when you're dividing, that's going to be really easy. And 12 is super close to 10. Down here on 6, we have a 9. Again, super close to 10. All I need to do is bring this to a number that is divisible by 10. I can do that in a couple of different ways. In this case, if you want to make it quite easy, you could take your 3,277 to 3,000. And that division would be pretty simple. Of course, you could also take it to 3,200 divided by 10. That would be a pretty easy one too. It just depends on what's good in your own brain. Go ahead and complete 5 through 8. Check those before moving on to your independent practice of 9 through 20.